Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a special hand to Indira Chandrasekhar for that very kind introduction. I heard what you said about modern and something else, so I'm probably very ancient if I'm going to be working with papers. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for all being here. First and foremost, I want to extend a very warm welcome and my thanks to Mrs. Saida Mirza, who's our guest of honor this evening. Mrs. Mirza, Mubarak. Mrs. Mirza was one of the first people who got to know way back in 2016 that I'd started working on a novel called Mansur. And she's been very, very helpful and supportive with my work. And more recently, which was November 24th last year to be precise, she was the one who unwrapped the very first advance copy I received from my publisher. So having Hugh here with us is very special for me. Thank you. When my publishers, Pan Macmillan, first brought up the idea of doing a Bangalore event for the novel, I asked them whether we could do something slightly different from the usual reading. And they said, yes, what would you want to do? So I said, well, this is what I would like to do, and I would also like to do it specifically for an organization called the International Music and Arts Society. So that's why we're all here. So my first thanks really are to my good people at Pan Macmillan for indulging me and also for recording today's reading for their archives. And my next thanks are to my dear friend Urmila and to the committee of the IMAs for making this possible. Thank you so much. Urmila has just walked in now. Thank you. And I'm grateful, of course, to the BIC for very kindly letting us use these facilities today. There is one other person I must acknowledge, and that's the eminent historian and Mansur scholar, Dr. Ashok Kumar Das, to whom my novel is dedicated. And frankly, if he hadn't introduced me to Mansur's world way back in August 2015, a lot of things would not have happened. So, if we can have the lights down a little bit. And so we go into Mansur's world. Just so that I don't keep rambling on and on and on and put everyone to sleep over the next 45 minutes, I've come well prepared with a script. So that's why I said this is actually going to be an illustrated reading, not really a talk. From around 1580 to 1650, a mixed group of some 200 Hindu and Muslim artists from the northern and central provinces had busied themselves perfecting and defining the art of the Mughal book. The art itself was a distillation of older Arab, Persian, and Central Asian influences. Working between Agra, Fatehpur Sikri, Lahore, and Agra again, these artists had embarked on this adventure with three successive emperors, Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan. Beyond their names and signatures and the occasional family tree, almost nothing is known about these men and some women. Our focus over the next 45 minutes is one particular group of artists, books, and paintings. The main timeline is 1600 to 1627. The idea here is to get a sense of the political, social, and personal impulses that had led to the making of these artifacts. The art of the Mughal book was a private enterprise undertaken at great expense. It was meant, first and foremost, for the patron's eye, and only then, selectively, a circle of immediate family and other intimates. The selection this evening is magnified a zillion times over. The originals are jewel-like, and almost all of them are in storage in museum and private collections around the world. Originally, they would have all been looked at in clear daylight or by lamplight, and almost always in their makers' and owners' hands. That's precisely what's happening in this tiny brush and ink sketch, less than 3 centimeters high, by an unnamed artist. We're more familiar with Akbar in his official portraits. The emperor here seems to be in his 50s, so it must be the 1590s. His turban is unadorned, an informal setting perhaps. Perhaps he's in the women's quarter assessing a jewel, and a resident artist has captured this moment. Or perhaps he's in his library with an album of paintings, admiring, not reading, a page of calligraphy. We do know that Akbar had inherited a vast library from his father Humayun and his grandfather Babur, which he'd expanded with his own commissions of illustrated manuscripts. It's also well documented that Akbar was semi-literate, had an insatiable thirst for knowledge, and books were read aloud to him. He was deeply interested in the world's religions and had founded a syncretic one, the short-lived Deen-e-Ilahi. The detail on the right of a painting by Narsingh for the Akbarnama in 1605 recalls the famous Jesuit mission of 1580 from Portuguese Goa to Fatehpur Sikri. Among the ideas the Jesuits Rodolfo Acquaviva and Francisco Enriquez had brought to Akbar's Ibadat Khana, or house of worship, were Bibles and painted as well as sculptured artifacts. These would very soon influence the art of the Mughal book and its paintings. Books, as you can see, are everywhere in this detail, on the carpet and in the hands of the men. Some of the books are pocket-sized. The largest occupies pride of place. The image on the left is a typical handspan-sized volume from Akbar's personal library. A khamse, or quintet, of the 13th century Sufi poet Amir Khusro had been made for the emperor in 1598. The quintet, in Persian, was written in Nastaliq script by a master calligrapher, Muhammad Hussain al-Kashmiri, whom Akbar had styled Zareen Kalam, or golden pen. 11 miniaturists and 4 nakkash, or designers, had been assigned the book's paintings and ornament. They had all begun their careers in the 1580s in Agra Fort, in Akbar's ateliers. One of those 4 nakkash was one Mansur, possibly in his early 20s in 1598. Typically, the opening page of such books carries a painted sunburst motif known as a shamse. The reverse of the opening page, which you see on the left, carries an unvan, which is an ornamented heading to the book's title page. The empty space in the middle of the shamse is generally meant for a seal of ownership. Here, the seals of Akbar and Jahangir are stamped in duplicate below the motif. This sunburst itself seems to float on its watered gold background as though it were a physical ornament. These 2 pages by Mansur Nakash preface one of the book's 5 poems. They would have taken him weeks to plan and to meticulously paint. Mansur's work through the 1590s had included other verse books of a host of other poets, as well as illuminations for Akbar's life story, which was already underway. It must have been a very busy time for him. He had simultaneously been assigned to Akbar's grandfather Babur's memoirs. The first Mughal had penned his Baburnama in the early 1500s. The book's original Chagatai Turki had been translated to the court language Persian by 1589. Over the next 7 years, a massive production line took on the book's making. Master painters composing the elements of each page, junior artists filling in the colors and details, calligraphers the text blocks and text pages. Mansur had worked alongside the master painter Kanha. These pairs of nilgai, hog deer, and wild buffalo are just 3 of the oddities Babur had encountered when he arrived in Hind. Mansur's animals already convey a certain lightness and life breath, an intimation perhaps of great things ahead. Kanha's landscapes hark back to older Persian Safavid and Central Asian Timurid modes of describing mountains and trees. A more monumental project of the same time in both scale and conception was a 3-volume Akbarnama. Authored by Akbar's polymath friend Abu'l Fazl in 1590 to 96, it tells of actual events in a frankly extraordinary life and does so in frankly fawning language. 49 of Akbar's best miniaturists were kept busy from 1592 to 94 with its miniatures, which aren't really miniature at all, at around 22 or 23 centimeters a page. Although stylized, the depiction of actual people, not imagined likenesses, was a first in Indian art. Under the influence of Christian art, all those Bibles the Jesuits had brought in, the paintings carry an underlying theme of surrender. Everything from the forces of nature to the gates of forts, raging tigresses to Rajput Ranas, everything must submit to the near divine presence that's the book's protagonist. Almost all the paintings are collaborative works. So seamlessly executed, they each appear to be the works of individual artists. The scene on the left by Miskina and Mansur records a historic 5-day-long kamarga or stockade hunt in 1567. On the right, the arrival in 1573 of some prisoners before an out-of-frame Akbar are by Basavan and Mansur. A little warning now. Some of you might find the next image a little bit disturbing. In a few square centimeters of a 10-mile radius stockade, no fewer than 40 animals run helter-skelter, are cornered, killed, skinned, and gutted. Here are nilgai and blackbuck, chinkara and mountain goats, jackals and hare, a hyena and civet cats, and an ox-drawn cart to clear away the mess. Akbar, on pristine mount, lets fly an arrow which downs a cheetal stag in mid-flight. Only the emperor and his son, down there, have license to kill. Only his hunting cheetahs look truly pleased. Remaindered animals were generally given a new lease of life, a sign of imperial largesse. No such luck for the prisoners General Hussain Kili Khan has marched in following a successful campaign. These poor men, waving thorny fronds, will be squeezed of breath as the hides they're bound in dry and shrink. The stinking air is abuzz with flies. In death as in life, Mansur's animals radiate life. The sightless hides wear ironic smiles. A length of blue carpet in the background nods to Mansur's illumination skills. Always better at faces and profile, 3/4 at best, Mughal head-on portraits, which are rare in themselves, generally end up looking a little bit mad. In the midst of all this, Akbar's son Salim had been busy rebelling against his father, and by the turn of the century had set himself up in a rival court in Allahabad. Salim also poached a set of his father's best artists. Between 1598 and 1608, this hand-picked set would assemble for Salim a spectacular compendium of poetry, calligraphy, Christian engravings, and paintings inspired by those engravings. This was the Murakka-e-Gulshan, or the Rose Garden album, and these are just two of its more than 200 pages. The page on the left has Farooq Chela's imagined version of the Great Flood and Noah's Ark, complete with animals arriving for their cruise in pairs. The ark is right up there, and you can see the little deer and other animals marching up in pairs. The page on the right has verses by Qasim al-Anwar, calligraphy by Jafar Tabriz, and decorative frames by one Luftullah. Now, full marks for guessing who painted these jewel-like birds in their pairs, twittering away in the golden groves on both these pages. Note the particular arrangement of the pairing of birds. It's a signature style we'll see more of in time. Mansur inscribes his name in the saddlecloth of the horse in the right-hand side edge. His name appears just here. These two pages are from 1600 and 1604. And now for something truly groundbreaking, also from the Gulshan album, but from the year 1608. Perhaps for the first time, a Mughal painter has the honor of portraying himself and his friends as realistic, not stylized, flesh and blood men. The painter is Daulat, self-portrait, extreme left, making a portrait of Govardhan, who's turned around to look at Bishandas. Manohar and Abu'l Hasan are minding their business in the right side margin. Note the painter's materials and stationery. We'll take a closer peek in a bit. Meanwhile, Jahangir, above Abu'l Hasan, has opened a large picture book before bedtime. Surely it must be the Gulshan album, and surely it's this very page of verses by Sultan Hussain Mirza and Jami. We can imagine how significant this page must have been for these men. Imagine being told you can not only just sign yourselves, but you can actually portray yourselves in a page in my album. In any case, they'd all gone on to do spectacular things. Govardhan was the son of the painter Bhavani Das and therefore a Khanazad, or one born to a servant of the court. He was the height of his career when he'd made this portrait of Akbar in 1630 for Akbar's grandson Shah Jahan. The old emperor, by the way, had been already dead for 25 years. The composition abounds with imported elements, which by this time are a staple of Mughal high style. Note the musical cherubs in the scurrying clouds. Their friend in the middle brings an English crown. The late emperor, hallowed be his name, holds out a rosary. The bucolic scene suggests an arc of the globe. The coexistence of all creeds, championed by Akbar, Jahangir, and Shah Jahan, is represented by the placid calf and lion. Akbar's pearly robe, incidentally, is not due for laundry. Sweaty imperial underarms, young or old, man or woman, were a visual metaphor of prized imperial perfumes which only VIPs were permitted. That's a clue. And in any case, they all wear halos. So the next time you look at a Mughal miniature, you'll be looking for sweaty underarms. Say, that is a prince, that is a rule king. This portrait also contains a sly visual pun. Artists, like all of us, would have poked fun at each other as well as at themselves. If you look at these two images, that one from Daulat's painting of Govardhan in 1608 and Govardhan's painting of Akbar from 1630, Govardhan's lion echoes his pose in Daulat's portrait of him, in which Govardhan has turned around to look at Bishandas. Yep. Bishandas in 1615 had famously reimagined an August birthday in 1569 for Jahangir's memoir. He, Salim Jahangir, has just been birthed in the Rang Mahal in Fatehpur Sikri. Jahangir's memoir followed the example of his great-grandfather Babur's Nama, or great-grandfather's Babur Nama, and has none of the laudatory tones of his father's Akbar Nama. A different manuscript, the Majalisi Jahangiri, recorded Jahangir's nocturnal debates from 1608 to 1611. Now, this document, in recent times, has become the subject of new scholarship. The figure that emerges from both these works is of a man deeply invested in the sciences, the arts, and the natural world, an astute political mind, fully aware of his foibles and weaknesses, a multi-dimensional bundle of contradictions with a self-deprecatory sense of humor. Not at all the lazy inheritor of his father's empire or the substance-abusing husband of Nur Jahan that history tends to paint him as. In the lower half of Bishandas' painting for the Jahangir Nama, baby Salim's arrival has just been broadcast from the palace gate. The upper half of the composition is the dominion of women. Presiding over the united colors of Zenana, from that chair is the Queen Mother, Maryam Makhani, she who dwells in Mary, better known as Hamida Banu Begum, Humayun's dowager wife, and Akbar's mother. Prominent residents of the quarter are Persian women in their characteristic headgear. Here too are Far Eastern and East European women, and women from countries south of the Mughal dominions. A raucous band of musicians have just appeared. A turbaned eunuch stands by. He's a high-ranking Khwaja Sarai. A purple brocaded blind has just been lifted. Baby Salim is about to be placed in his crib. His mother, Maryam-uz-Zamani, Mary of the age, the former princess Hir Kunwari of Amer, looks like she's completely out of it. Just one of these women is looking at us from Bishandas's frame. We're being watched, a friend has just said. Somewhere in that frame were some women who themselves excelled at painting. Nothing is known of one Shaife Banu, aside from the portrait of her of Shah Tahmasp of Persia, to which Mansur, our dear friend, had added the gold and blue border, all kingfishers and tulips and irises and cranes. Another artist, Nadire Banu, was the daughter of a Persian painter, Mir Taki, and had been trained also by her father's colleague, the Persian portraitist Akariza, who was Abu'l Hasan's dad. Yet another woman, who goes by the very sweet name Nini, seems to have been enamored of Christian saints. Her painting, the other one there, of the martyrdom of Saint Cecilia is a copy of a 16th century Flemish engraving by Hieronymus Jerome Verix. Manohar, the son of Basavan, had an illustrious career as a painter of people as well as animals for both Akbar and Jahangir. This portrait of Salim enthroned in his rival court in Allahabad was a collaborative work. Manohar for the portrait and Mansur, of course, for the throne ornament. Portraits of Mughal children are rare. In fact, portraits of any children are rare in Mughal paintings. In Manohar's portrait, Jahangir's favorite grandchild Shah Shuja, who is Khurram Shah Jahan and Arjumand, later Mumtaz Banu's second son, is just 4 years old. It was painted in 1620. Marooned in this sea of green, the pale, delicate child is holding a blue poppy. A gold rope of amulets cross his chest. A junior halo encircles his head. His upper garment, puffed hawa or woven of air Bengal muslin, has shifted very slightly in a breeze. One day this little chap is going to meet a very, very sticky end. Another precious child, Abu'l Hasan, older son of Akariza, was famously born to the art. He'd famously made this copy, aged 13 in 1600, of St. John the Baptist from Albrecht Dürer's engraved Passion series. Abu'l Hasan here is 21 in Dawlat's portrait of him. We see he's left-handed, and how earnest he looks bent over his drawing tablet. We can leave him for a bit now and meet Dawlat again. Dawlat in 1611 and on Jahangir's orders had added this page to a Khamse of Nizami, which had originally been made for Akbar in 1595. Now, why was that done? Because Jahangir wanted to commemorate the calligrapher, the original calligrapher of this book, Abdur Rahim Ambareen Kalam, or perfumed pen, whom we see seated on the right. Painters and calligraphers knew the benefits of working in the first half of the day. A sunlit gallery gives onto a flower bed. A floral carpet has a plain rug overlaid. There's a door blind behind Abur Rahim and painted alcoves in the wall of the gallery. Dawlat wets the tip of his brush. The brush itself is of squirrel hair. The mussel shells around him hold pigments sourced from geology and biology and prepared with water and gum arabic. There are stationery cases, a leather wallet for silver and gold leaf, and an untouched glass of almond milk, waiting for either of the men to help themselves to it. Dawlat's gaze is on his subject. Abur Rahim's portrait is taking shape. The paper on the drawing tablet is the finest Isfahani. The perfumed pen is writing about the miniatures in the book lying open before him. He's weighed down the pages with something so that the pages don't fly. The book is the same quintet of Nizami. Such is the hypnotic quality of these paintings. Also in 1611, Abu'l Hasan and Mansur collaborated, possibly the only time they did collaborate, on this portrait of a chinar in autumn leaf with an overabundance of red squirrels in it. This image, I believe, will benefit from not having someone droning on about it. Only note Mansur's hallmark arrangement of birds, which I mentioned earlier, and please count the different species. The 1610s are an exciting decade for Jahangir. With Khurram Shah Jahan holding fort in Burhanpur and keeping the sultans of Bijapur and Ahmednagar on edge, Jahangir can finally focus on two of his favorite subjects: administrative innovations and artistic innovations. A chain of justice was strung from Agra fort to the Jamna's bank. Anyone ringing in a petition was assured a hearing. It must have jangled constantly. The chain features in a series of wish fulfillment allegories. Abu'l Hasan, by now titled Nadiruz Zaman, Rarity of the Age, was Jahangir's go-to man for these. On the left, Jahangir aims a magical arrow at a personification of poverty, which may equally be a personification of the plague, which was rampant in those times. Look at that helpful cherub holding up arrows for Jahangir. More difficult to wish away was Malik Ambar, the Abyssinian freed slave turned statesman of Ahmednagar, whose guts Jahangir simply could not stand. But of course, with Malik Ambar in Ahmednagar and Akbar shuttling between Agra and Lahore, There isn't very much else he could do than shoot magical arrows at Malik Ambar's head, decapitated, and popped up on that stake. In the same vein, Abu'l Hasan in 1618 makes Jahangir perched on a globe and in those sweet little booties, taking Shah Abbas of Persia in a patronizing, if not entirely bone-crushing hug. It's all very strange since only Jahangir can see any of these paintings. Poverty certainly can't see the paintings, most certainly not Malik Ambar, and certainly not Shah Abbas. In a different allegory from around the same time, which is 1616, it's the Ottoman Sultan of Turkey and King James of England who are snubbed by Jahangir, who himself is seated on an hourglass and gifting a little book to a humble Sufi sheikh. Please note that in both paintings, Jahangir is framed in an enormous golden sun and silvery crescent moon. Those cherubs are busy as usual, doing their thing in the sky and everywhere else. Like his father, Jahangir too has a calf and a lion under his feet in one of those two paintings. But with these two paintings, things in the Mughal painting world gets really, really exciting. Mughal painters were permitted, even encouraged, to share their concepts and even paper tracings. For all their similarities in elements, gestures, and profiles, these two paintings are in fact by two different men. Abu'l Hasan, the Shah Abbas allegory on the right, and on the left, Jahangir preferring a Sufi sheikh to kings by a painter with the very unique assumed name Bichitr. Bichitr. So there he is. Self-portrait, holding up a self-portrait in the company of two horses and an elephant. The winged cherubs are writing in the hourglass, a bit like we write in dusty windscreens. O monarch, may your reign last 1,000 years. That cushioned footstool reads, the work of the slave of the court, Bichitr. Looking slightly ill is King James I and VI of England, Scotland, and Ireland. Of course, Bichitr hadn't seen a real King James. A portrait or portraits based on originals by John the Critz the Elder, that one's for example only, that wasn't the actual one, had accompanied the embassy of Thomas Roe to Jahangir's court in 1615. Bichitr's Mughalized King James was possibly a study for the hourglass painting. A very different gift to the Mughal court around 1620 was a flesh and blood artist. The Persian portraitist Mir Hashim may have been an item of diplomatic currency from the Deccan. Hashim had served at the ateliers of either or both Ibrahim Adil Shah II of Bijapur and or Malik Ambar of Ahmednagar. Hashim was a master of the more subtle palette and style of the Deccan school. He was commissioned to a series of portraits of Deccan personalities for Jahangir. It included the stunning likeness of Malik Ambar, stunning not least for the handling of muslin and other textile details. Please note Malik Ambar's little finger outstretched as he holds up the pleats of his jame. Note his indigo pajamas with the yellow heel straps, the red-orange shoes, the crinkled cotton shawl, and Malik Ambar's own rock-solid solidness. Compare it to the softer modeling of Fath Khan, Malik Ambar's son from his wife, Bibi Karime, also painted by Hashim. On the subject of wives, here's what our friend Govardhan has done with Jahangir's 20th and best beloved. if I were empress, I wouldn't be amused. Even the maidservants who'd obviously seen everything look completely horrified. But more to the point, no male artist could have possibly inspected Nur Jahan long or close enough to make a faithful likeness of the empress. Supposed portraits of hers are more often conventionalized figures with distinguishing features, those eyebrows in Nur Jahan's case. The smaller portrait, supposedly for a pendant, like Akbar's pendant in the unsigned sketch, is perhaps closer to the reality of it. Perhaps it was a woman artist who'd painted that little portrait. Perhaps Jahangir, wizened and grumpy in the unsigned sketch, had run out of time or the energy to set it in a pendant. Jahangir was not oblivious to the effects of overindulging. A member of his coterie, Inayat Khan, had been a dapper grandee, as portrayed by Daulat, until the same chap, in Jahangir's own words in the Jahangir Nama, had become, and here I open quotes, addicted to opium, and when he had a chance to drinking as well, he became maddened with wine. As he was weakly built, he took more than he could digest and developed the disease of diarrhea and, it's quite disgusting. Anyway, the painters had striven much in drawing an emaciated face, yet I've never seen anything like it. As it was a very extraordinary case, I directed painters to take this portrait. End quotes. Govardhan was the painter directed to document poor Inayat Khan, not once but twice, first as a sketch and then as a painting, just so that Jahangir could see his dying courtier. This then was the world Mansur inhabited, no doubt hiding in plain sight as he went about quietly recording the natural world around him. He'd painted this wee little chameleon. It's just 11 by 13 centimeters, in or around 1610. The chameleon isn't alone. A butterfly flutters by. Soon it will be lunchtime. A wry character study of a reptile freezes the fleeting nature of all life. It was this quality that had first caught Jahangir's eye. When an exotic in the company of other oddities arrived in Agra from Goa in 1612, Jahangir noted, "As these animals appeared to me to be very strange, I both described them and ordered that painters should draw them in the Jahangir Nama so that the amazement that arose from hearing of them may be increased. One of these animals in body is larger than a peahen and smaller than a peacock. When it's in heat and displays itself, it spreads out its feathers like the peacock and dances about. Its beak and legs are like those of a cock. Its head and neck and the parts under the throat are every minute of a different color. When it's in heat, one might say it's adorned itself with red coral, and after a while it becomes white in the same places and looks like cotton. It sometimes looks of a turquoise color. Like a chameleon, it constantly changes color." Close quotes. In thanksgiving for this portrait, Jahangir awarded Mansur his title Nadir al-Asr, rarity of the present, signed for the first time in 1612 by the artist himself. We get a sense here of the planning that went in behind every painting. It must be said now that as their lives ran parallel, Jahangir and Mansur were in fact pioneering naturalists of their time, making the same journeys, observing the same things, and documenting their findings in words and images. This partnership between emperor and painter invariably came into its element in Kashmir. Kashmir is a garden, Jahangir writes, of eternal spring, a delightful flowerbed and a heart-expanding heritage for dervishes. Its pleasant meads and enchanting cascades are beyond description. This year, which was 1620, in the little garden of the palace, the red tulips flowered luxuriantly. There are many blue jessamines in the garden. The flowers that are seen in the territories of Kashmir are beyond all calculation. Those that my Nadir al-Asr, Ustad Mansur, has painted are over 100. On an earlier summer retreat, 1616, it was birds the naturalist had inspected closely. I was partaking of my usual cups by the stream, Jahangir says, when in the water I saw a bird and it looked like a dipper. A dipper is black and has white spots, whereas this bird is of the same color as a bulbul with white spots, and it dives and remains for a long time underwater and comes up from a different place. I ordered them to catch and bring me some of these birds so that I might inspect for myself whether they were waterfowl and were web-footed, or they had open feet like land birds. They caught and brought me 2 of them. One died and the other lived a day. Its feet, I saw, were not webbed like a duck's feet. As it was something out of the ordinary, what did I do? I ordered Ustad Mansur, who has the title Nadir al-Asr, to paint and preserve its likeness. That's the diving dipper. And this one is a Himalayan barbet. In the meantime, furred and feathered gifts continued to populate the imperial menagerie. Jahangir's spiky nastalik, dating from 1621, along the right-hand side reads, "A mule that the Rumis, accompanying Mir Zafar, brought in from Abyssinia, and which Nadir al-Asr, Ustad Mansur, has painted in the 16th year of my reign." A dodo accompanied an English gift from Surat in 1613 or 1624. It couldn't possibly have known that all of its kind would be extinct by 1683. Nor could Mansur have possibly imagined that this painting, from around 1626, would one day be considered the only authentic life study of the species. With the dodo, Mansur himself exits stage left. Others had attempted to fill his place. My story could actually end right here, except that Jahangir had died in October 1627. Shah Jahan acceded to the throne in February 1628. Nur Jahan was pensioned off to keep her out of mischief. A number of artists, with the conspicuous absence of Abu'l Hasan, we don't know what happens to him, continued to serve the new emperor. Among them was Abu'l Hasan's brother Abid, Bichitr, the brothers Balchand and Payag, Vishan Das, Daulat, and Govardhan. Between 1630 and the late 1640s, the best of the best would create the last word in the art of the Mughal painting. One of the 14 painters of the 44 paintings of the Padshah Nama had the birth name Murar, or possibly Murad. Murad had been a student of Abu'l Hasan under the assumed name Mirar. Now in his mid-30s, Murar has not just these 2, but 5 paintings to his credit in Shah Jahan's Book of the King. There is Murad in white turban and jama. To something he said, red turban in the middle before the elephant, has turned his head a full 108 degrees. Mirar is 14 years old in my novel, the grandson of a painter formerly in Akbar's employ. This unsigned brush and ink drawing is from the 1580s. The nastalik above the figure simply reads, Pusht-e-Akbar, Akbar's back. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.